The North Atlantic, March 9th, 1945, midnight. The destroyer USS Stormchild was dying. Not from enemy fire, but from exhaustion. Her decks vibrated with a relentless, sickening hum. For 8 brutal hours, she had hunted. Depth charge after depth charge had rolled off her stern, plunging into the black void below. Each explosion was a thunderclap in the deep, a hopeful prayer. Silence was the only answer. On the bridge, Captain Lieutenant James McPherson tasted copper, fear, or fatigue. He was a man out of place. Wire-framed glasses, a mind built for quiet libraries and hydrodynamic equations, stuffed into the oil-stained jacket of a warship commander. He pressed his forehead against the icy window. Behind him, the sonar operator's voice was a ragged monotone, reporting nothing. Always nothing. Then a sound. Not from the speakers. From the ship itself. A long, grating shriek of tortured metal from the starboard bow, as if a giant hook had scraped along the hull. The bridge snapped to silence. Every man froze. Before McPherson could speak, the ocean erupted. Not with a submarine. With light. A fierce chemical green glow surged from the depths, 50 yards off the port side. It lit the underbellies of the waves, turning the spray into emerald ghosts. It was unnatural. Wrong. Searchlights. Now. McPherson's command was a raw crack in the quiet. Twin beams of white stabbed into the night, crossing over the bubbling, glowing patch. And there, rising from that hellish radiance, was the bow. It was not a U-boat, not any submarine he had ever seen in a manual. It was a wedge, a slab of matte black steel, angular and sharp, shedding water like an emerging sword. No curves, only hard, brutal angles. It had no deck guns, no visible hatches, just seamless, featureless metal, absorbing the searchlights rather than reflecting them. A young signalman, Evans, choked out a whisper. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, it's a demon ship." The thing was silent. It rose to its full length, maybe 2/3 the size of a standard U-boat, and simply lay there, dead in the water. No smoke, no movement, no human sound, only the green glow fading from the water around it, leaving it a black cutout against the dark sea. The radio crackled to life with a static, shredded voice from command. McPherson had sent the contact report minutes ago. The reply was immediate and absolute. Stormchild, confirm visual on experimental hostile. Orders are final and immediate. Destroy target. Do not approach. Do not attempt recovery. Weapons free. Acknowledge. McPherson's executive officer, Lieutenant Briggs, a career sailor with fists like granite, was already at his shoulder. "You heard them, Captain. 1 5-inch shell into that conning tower hump. It'll go down like a stone." McPherson didn't move. His engineer's mind, trained to see systems, to see function, was screaming. Why no visible ports? Where is the hydroplane housing? How does it dive with that shape? This wasn't just a weapon. It was a question that could change everything. "Gunnery, stand by," McPherson said, his voice low. "But hold fire. Captain!" Briggs's protest was a physical force in the air. McPherson raised his binoculars. He scanned the Phantom from bow to stern. Nothing. Then, as the Stormchild drifted on a slow swell, the angle changed. The starboard side of the low, sloping conning tower came into view. There, a black line. He adjusted the focus. Not a line, a gap. The main access hatch was open, not flung wide in panic, not welded shut for a deep dive. It was precisely, deliberately dogged open about 3 inches. A sliver of pure blackness yawned behind it. In that moment, James McPherson was no longer a captain following orders. He was a professor faced with a locked door to a forbidden library. The orders were to burn the library. The open hatch was a key left in the lock. "Briggs," he said, not lowering the glasses. "They didn't scuttle her. If they were flooding her, the pressure would have blown that hatch shut or ripped it off. They jammed it open. They wanted it open. For what? Rats to escape," Briggs spat. "For an equalization of pressure," McPherson said, the technical term cold on his tongue. "So something inside wouldn't be crushed on the way down. Or," he trailed off, the worst possibility forming. "So it could be opened again from the outside, easily." The radio squawked again, urgent. "Stormchild, acknowledge destruction order. Command demands confirmation." All eyes were on him. The fearful, superstitious stares of the crew. The furious, disciplined glare of Briggs. The silent, mocking void of the black wedge in the water. He saw his career ending in court-martial. He saw the medal they might pin on him if he simply said the word fire. He saw the secrets inside that angular tomb being lost forever to the crushing deep. He made his choice. He turned to the radio operator. "Send to command. Target surfaced. Appears non-operational and abandoned. Conducting close-range inspection to confirm scuttle charges before destruction. Stormchild out." He switched off the radio speaker, cutting off the inevitable roar from the other end. Then he looked at his horrified crew. His voice was calm, final, and carried the weight of their possible deaths. "Lower the whaleboat. I need 6 volunteers. Not gunners, mechanics, electricians, men who know how things work and aren't afraid of the dark." He took off his glasses, wiped the salt spray from them, and put them back on, staring at the open hatch. "We're going to board her." Silence. For 3 full seconds after the captain's order, there was only the groan of the Stormchild's hull and the hiss of the sea. Then chaos erupted. Lieutenant Briggs slammed a fist on the chart table. "It's suicide, Jim. That thing is a coffin. Command said destroy it." "Command isn't looking at that hatch, Tom," McPherson said, his eyes never leaving the black wedge. "They're looking at a report. I'm looking at an open door." He turned to the crew on the bridge. Their faces were pale in the instrument lights. Young Evans, the signalman, looked like he might be sick. "I need 6. Volunteers only. Chief Reynolds, you have the deck." Chief Petty Officer Walter Reynolds, a man built like a fire plug with a face carved from old leather, stepped forward. He hadn't said a word. Until now. "I'll go, sir." "Chief, your place is—" "My place is where the wires are, Captain," Reynolds interrupted, his voice a low gravel. "And if that ghost ship has wires, they're like none I've ever seen. I'm going." That broke the dam. A wiry electrician's mate, Finch, raised a trembling hand. "I know German junction boxes, sir." Then O'Malley, the massive Irish engine mechanic, cracked his knuckles. "Someone's got to carry you lot when your legs go soft." One by one, they came forward. Not with bravado, but with a grim, terrifying curiosity. The professor had asked a question, and the men who fixed things needed to know the answer. They totaled 7, including McPherson. 1 short of his request. He was about to appoint someone when a figure emerged from the radar room. It was Simon Kano, the quiet, brilliant sonar operator. Half Japanese, he'd endured suspicion and silence for years. He held up a notebook filled with spectral hand-drawn graphs. "It's sound signature, sir," It didn't just run silent. It absorbed the pings. My equipment heard nothing but the ocean. It is not natural. I must see what makes such a silence. The crew was 8. The whaleboat hit the black water with a slap that echoed like a gunshot. The journey of 200 yards felt like crossing an ocean. The green phosphorescence was gone, replaced by the inky, sucking black. The only sound was the putter of their motor and the ragged breathing of the men. As they neared, the U-boat loomed larger, more alien. The matte black hull seemed to drink the light from their hand lanterns. It wasn't rusty. It looked newborn from some dark forge. O'Malley, staring up at it, crossed himself. They bumped against the slick, angled hull. No ladder, no rope, nothing to hold on to. "Grappling hooks," Reynolds ordered. The iron claws screeched against the metal, failing to find a purchase on the smooth, featureless surface. Panic flickered. They were exposed, bobbing, next to the thing like flies on a sleeping beast. "The hatch," McPherson said, pointing upward. "The coaming. Hook onto the hatch rim." Finch stood, swaying dangerously, and hurled a hook upward. It clanged and caught on the inner edge of the open hatch. They had one shaky line to the monster. "O'Malley, you're first. Reynolds, after. Go." The big Irishman went up the rope like a climber on a cliff, his boots scrambling against the featureless steel. He hauled himself onto the narrow, sloping back of the conning tower, lying flat. He reached down and pulled Reynolds up. One by one, they ascended. McPherson went last. As he pulled himself onto the tower, his hand touched the metal. It was cold. Not the cold of the Atlantic night. A deeper, more profound cold. Like the chill of a glacier, seeping through his glove. They were crouched on a steel island barely 6 feet wide. Before them was the source of the black line, the hatch. The 3-inch gap was a mouth breathing out stale, metallic air. Reynolds shone his lantern into the opening. The beam pierced straight down a vertical ladder tube, illuminating the top rungs. It revealed nothing else, just a plunge into darkness. "No sounds," Finch whispered. "No flooding? No machinery? Nothing?" "That's what's wrong," Kano said, his ear almost to the gap. "A sinking ship has sounds, pops, groans, drips. This has none. It is a vacuum." Reynolds took a heavy wrench from his belt. With a sharp, decisive motion, he hammered it against the hatch door, right beside the dogging wheel. The clang was obscenely loud, a violation of the silence. They waited. For a shout, a shot, a hiss of gas, a triggering of charges. Nothing answered. "Right," Reynolds grunted. He handed his lantern to O'Malley, gripped the dogging wheel, and heaved. Muscles corded in his neck. With a shriek of protest from metal that had never been meant to move again, the wheel turned. The hatch swung open on silent, oiled hinges. The smell hit them first. Not rot, not cordite, not the expected sense of a submarine. It was ozone, sharp, electric. Like the air after a massive lightning strike mixed with a sweet, cloying chemical odor, formaldehyde and burnt copper. It was the smell of a laboratory after a catastrophic experiment. Reynolds looked at McPherson, his face hard in the lantern light. "Last chance, Professor. We go down there. We own whatever happens." McPherson thought of the court-martial. He thought of Briggs's fury. He thought of the seamless, impossible hull beneath his feet. He nodded. "Chief," he said, "let's see what they were so afraid of we had to destroy it on sight." Reynolds went first, descending into the black. McPherson followed. The ladder rungs were the same unnatural cold. As his head dropped below the hatch combing, the outside world vanished. The smell intensified. The silence became a physical pressure on his eardrums. His boots hit the deck below. He stood up in the control room of the U-boat. And his mind, the rational engineering mind, broke. The room was a pristine, white operating theater clean. No pipes ran exposed along the ceiling. No wires snaked across the floor. Banks of glass-paneled instruments glowed with a soft, internal amber light, displaying symbols and scrolling numerals in no alphabet he knew. In the center, where the periscope should have been, stood a single contoured chair made of a dull gray composite material, facing a vast, curved, black screen. But that was not what stopped his heart. The crew was at their stations. 7 men in black leather uniforms, not wool. They sat upright in chairs, strapped in. Their hands rested on control panels or hung limply by their sides. Their faces were pale, waxy, and utterly peaceful. Eyes open, staring blankly at dead screens and silent instruments. They looked like mannequins. Preserved. Perfect. McPherson took a stumbling step forward, his lantern beam shaking. He came to the first crewman, a young officer whose head was tilted slightly, as if listening to a distant tune. McPherson reached out, his fingers an inch from the man's neck. "Don't." Reynolds' hand clamped on his wrist like a vice. The chief's face was a mask of pure dread. He pointed his own light at the crewman's cheek, then slowly moved the beam. The light caught it. A fine, almost invisible filament. A thread of glass or clear plastic, no thicker than a hair, running from a tiny port in the console, up the side of the chair, and disappearing into the man's ear. Every single crew member had one. A thin, shimmering line connecting them to the machine. "They're not dead, sir," Reynolds whispered, the horror leaching the gravel from his voice. "They're plugged in." McPherson jerked his hand back, as if the air around the crewman was poison. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the tomb silence. The ozone chemical smell was thicker here, pooled in their lungs with every shallow breath. O'Malley's bulk filled the hatch opening above, blocking the faint starlight. "What's down there? Report." Reynolds didn't look up. His light traced the filament from the crewman's ear back to the console. It plugged into a small, crystalline node that pulsed with a faint, internal blue light. Thump. A slow, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. "Don't touch anything," McPherson breathed, the professor in him seizing control from the soldier. "Not a switch, not a lever. Finch, Kano, lights, map this room." "Do not make contact." The 2 younger men slid down the ladder, their lanterns joining the others, turning the sterile control room into a cave of swaying shadows and ghastly, illuminated faces. The seated men did not react. Their chests did not rise or fall. Kano went to the main curved screen. It was not glass. It felt smooth and cool like polished stone, but showed a faint, complex, hexagonal grid pattern, dormant. He held his notebook, comparing the grid to his sonar graphs. "The absorption frequency, it's here, mathematically. This is not just a display. It is a transmitter, or a receiver." Finch was at a secondary panel, his face inches from the alien script. "No valves, no tubes. It's all solid state. Impossible. It's like looking inside a watch from the year 2000. His finger hovered over a smooth touch plate. "I could—" "Finch!" Reynolds' bark was a whip crack. The electrician flinched. "Your finger touches that, and we all burn. Or wake them up." Which is worse? The question hung in the chemical air. McPherson forced himself to move. Past the helmsman, past the sonar operator, a twin to Kano in posture, wired to his station. He moved toward a sealed hatch at the rear of the control room, marked with a symbol. A circle intersected by 3 lightning bolts. The forward torpedo room? Or something else? The hatch had no wheel. Only a flat black palm plate and a single red glass lens. "Chief, this one." Reynolds came over, examined it. "No bolts. Hydraulic, maybe. Or magnetic." He put his ear to the cold metal. His eyes widened. He held up a hand for absolute silence. From beyond the hatch came a sound. Tick, tick, tick. Not a clock. Slower. More metallic. Tick, tick, tick. Followed by a soft, hydraulic hiss. Then a clunk. Then silence for 5 seconds. Then it repeated. Tick, tick, tick. Hiss. Clunk. A sequence. A cycle. "Machinery," O'Malley whispered from above. "Something's running." "Something's alive," Finch corrected, his voice trembling. McPherson looked at the wired crew, then at the sealed hatch with its rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat. The crew wasn't operating the submarine. They were connected to it. And something in the next compartment was running on its own. "We need to get in there," McPherson said. "How?" Reynolds gestured at the palm plate. "We blow it. We might rupture the hull right now." Kano had moved away from the screen. He was crouched by the youngest of the seated crew, a boy no older than 18. His light was on the boy's neck. "Sir, look." At the collar of the black leather uniform, just below the ear, the skin was not perfect. It was mottled. A subtle dark web of capillaries, black as ink, visible beneath the waxy parchment of his skin. It branched down under his collar, a tree of corruption. McPherson felt a cold deeper than the hull's chill. He'd seen diagrams in pathology journals, sepsis, systemic infection. But this was precise, deliberate. "They're not just plugged in," Kano said, his scientific detachment cracking. "They are being fed something, or drained." A new sound, a gasp. It came from the helm chair. Every American sailor froze, weapons snapping toward the seated men. The German helmsman's head lolled to the side. A shudder ran through his body, a violent tremor that made the leather creak. His jaw went slack. A thin stream of blackened, oily fluid trickled from the corner of his mouth and dripped onto his pristine uniform. His eyes, previously fixed and vacant, swiveled. Slowly, with a terrible mechanical stiffness. They moved past the barrels of the Thompson submachine guns, past the horrified faces of the intruders, and locked onto McPherson. The lips moved. A wet, clicking sound came out. Then a word. Guttural. Forced through a ruined throat. Nick, and prevent. Then the eyes rolled back. The shudder ceased. The man became a wax figure once more, the black fluid pooling in the hollow of his collarbone. The tick-tick hiss-clunk from behind the sealed hatch seemed louder. "What did he say?" O'Malley hissed. "He said prevent," McPherson translated, his mouth dry. "Or stop." "Stop what?" Finch's voice was near hysteria. Reynolds was already moving, not toward the sealed hatch, but back to the console where the filament connected to the dead helmsman. He shone his light on the crystalline node. The slow blue pulse was gone. The node was dark. His connection broke. When it broke, he woke up. Just for a second. Enough to warn us. McPherson stared at the dark node, then at the sealed, ticking hatch. The logic assembled itself with horrific clarity. The crew were capacitors, batteries, or filters. Their silent, wired vigil was containing what was in the next room. and one had just failed. "It's not a torpedo room," McPherson said, the truth dawning with sheer terror. "It's the core, the engine, and they're not the crew. They're the shield, and we're losing them." As if on cue, a second seated figure, the sonar operator, jerked in his straps. A low moan leaked from his lips. The filament in his ear glowed a sudden, feverish orange. The capillary blackness on his neck spread visibly, crawling toward his jawline. The tick-tick hiss-clunk from beyond the hatch increased its tempo. Tick-tick, hiss, clunk. Kano backed toward the ladder, his notes forgotten. The sound. It is matching the U-boat's absorption signature. It is powering up. The silence it creates, it is a side effect, a waste product. McPherson made a decision. It was no longer about curiosity. It was about survival. "O'Malley, the shaped charges from the boat. Now, we are blowing that hatch." "Captain, the hull," Reynolds started. "The hull is already dead. The crew is dead. Something in that room is alive and coming online. Now, O'Malley." As the big man moved, a deep, sub-audible hum vibrated through the deck plates. The amber lights on the instrument panels brightened. The main curved screen flickered, and the hexagonal grid lit up with a malevolent green light. On the screen, numbers flashed. Not coordinates. 0417. A countdown. The German sonar operator screamed. A short, sharp, digital sound. Then he slumped, black fluid pouring from his nose. His node went dark. 416. The hum deepened. The tick-tick hiss-clunk was a frantic drumbeat. McPherson looked at the remaining 5 wired men, their peaceful faces now looking like a dam about to burst. He looked at the numbers on the screen. He knew what they had found. Not a new engine. A bomb. And the timer was running. O'Malley slid down the ladder, a canvas satchel clutched to his chest like a sacred relic. The shaped charges. His face, usually a mask of brute confidence, was pale. The sub-audible hum was now a physical vibration in their teeth, in the fillings of their molars. 410 glowed on the main screen. The third crewman seized. This one didn't speak. His back arched against the leather straps with a sound of cracking cartilage. The clear filament in his ear turned blazing white, then shattered. A puff of acrid smoke escaped his ear canal, followed by a trickle of the same black viscous fluid. He fell forward, limp, held only by the restraints. Tick, 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 hiss, clunk. The cycle was almost continuous now. A machine coming to life. "Set the charge on the hatch seam! Minimum breach!" McPherson yelled over the rising hum. Reynolds and O'Malley went to work with frantic, practiced hands. Kneeling by the sealed door, they molded the plastic explosive putty along the hydraulic seam, inserting the detonator. Their fingers fumbled on the cold, featureless metal. Finch was hyperventilating, staring at the screen. 4 minutes! We can't defuse this. We don't even know what this is." Kano wasn't looking at the screen. He was at a secondary console, his light on a schematic etched beneath a glass plate. It wasn't a wiring diagram. It was a biological cross-section. A human brain, with the filament snaking into the auditory cortex, branching into the stem. Arrows pointed from the brain into a central, swirling core, labeled Kernreactor. "Captain," Kano said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "It is not a bomb. Not in the conventional sense, it is a reactor. A biological reactor, these men, their neural activity, their bioelectricity. It is the damping rod system. They are suppressing the reaction. As they fail," he pointed to the pulsing green grid on the main screen, "it approaches criticality. 0355. McPherson's mind raced. Equations of force and containment spiraling into nightmare. A reactor on a submarine, using human minds as control rods. The sheer blasphemous insanity of it froze him for a full second. "What happens at zero?" he asked, already knowing the answer would be worse than an explosion. Kano's eyes scanned the German text. "Not an explosion. An emission. A focused, resonant pulse. The notes from my sonar, the absorption signature. It is designed to emit a field that liquefies certain molecular bonds. At its core, it is a diesel engine, but the exhaust, it is not smoke." Another crewman failed. A violent, whole-body tremor, then instant stillness. 2 nodes dark, 340. The hum rose in pitch, a low tuning fork note that made their vision blur. A coffee mug on a console, the only normal object in the room, shattered into fine dust, not shards. "Stand clear!" Reynolds yelled. He shoved McPherson and Kano back toward the ladder. "Fire in the hole!" The shaped charge detonated with a deafening crack and a flash of blinding white light that left after-images of the wired corpses dancing in their vision. The sound was not followed by the roar of inrushing water. Smoke and the smell of burnt plastic filled the air. As it cleared, they saw the hatch. It was not blown open. It was gone. A perfect, melty-edged hole, 3 feet across, led into the next compartment. The metal around the hole glowed a dull cherry red, then quickly faded to black, as if the very hull was sucking the heat away. Through the hole, a light pulsed, not amber or green, a deep, rhythmic crimson. Thump, 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 in time with the vanished tick-tick hiss. Reynolds moved first, pushing his lantern beam into the opening. The beam didn't pierce far. It was swallowed by a swirling, faint crimson mist that filled the compartment. The space was small, barely 10 feet across, and in its center. "Mother of God," O'Malley breathed, crossing himself again. It was a cylinder, glass, or something clearer than glass. It ran from floor to ceiling. Inside it swirled a viscous, mercury-like fluid, glowing with its own internal red light. Suspended in the fluid were opaque, fleshy nodules, connected by pulsing, vein-like cables. It was grotesquely organic. A mechanical heart made of meat and metal. And at the base of the cylinder, connected by thick insulated conduits, was a perfectly standard, if compact, German diesel engine. It was running. Tick-tick-hiss-clunk. It was not powering the submarine. It was agitating the fluid. Feeding the core. 0315. "We have to shut down the diesel," Finch screamed, pointing at the mundane engine, the one thing he understood. "No!" Kano shouted back, his voice cracking with urgency. "The diesel is the only control. It regulates the agitation cycle. If you stop it abruptly, the fluid settles. The reaction goes prompt critical instantly. It is a mechanical control rod." McPherson stepped through the torn hatchway, into the mist. It was warm. It had a smell like hot copper and spoiled meat. The crimson light pulsed on his face. He saw details now. The fleshy nodules in the fluid were not random. They had structures. Tiny, filament-like tendrils. They were brains. Miniaturized, cultured neural tissue. The kern of the Kern reactor. The crew upstairs were the primary regulators. This was the backup. A bank of cloned, simplified minds in a soup, soaking up the excess resonance. A horror made real. 250. Another failure from the control room. A sound, like a sigh, from 4 throats at once. Then silence. Only 1 crewman left wired. The red pulse in the core quickened. Thump, thump, thump. The fluid swirled faster. The diesel engine's rhythm became frantic, metallic. straining. "They're all gone," Reynolds called from the control room, his voice hollow. The last one just emptied out. The screen changed. McPherson turned. On the main curved screen, the countdown was gone, replaced by a single flashing word in jagged German script. Entfesseln. Unleash. The diesel engine screamed into overdrive. The crimson light from the core flashed so brightly it burned through the mist, casting their screaming shadows against the walls. The hum became a shriek, a frequency that felt like ice picks driven into their temples. McPherson stared into the raging biological heart of the machine. They couldn't stop it. They couldn't run. The storm child was too close. The emission would turn her and every man aboard into molecular slurry. There was only one terrible, logical choice. He turned to Reynolds, his friend's face etched in the hellish red strobe. "We don't shut it down," McPherson yelled over the shrieking frequency. "We sink it. Right now. We blow the main ballast tanks from inside. We send this thing so deep, the pressure crushes it before it can fire." Reynolds understood instantly. To scuttle a U-boat from within, you needed to open the sea vents, which were, on every German sub, in the control room. The room they were standing in. The room that would be the first to flood. "You'll never get out," Reynolds said, not as a protest, but a fact. "Nobody gets out," McPherson corrected, looking at the glowing core. "But the storm child does. Briggs gets to be right." He looked at his men. O'Malley, gripping a pipe, his jaw set. Finch, weeping silently, but nodding. Kano, already moving to the German ballast control panel, his scientist's mind embracing the final equation. Reynolds locked eyes with his captain. He gave one short, sharp nod. "Tell me what to blow, Professor," he said. Reynolds's nod wasn't agreement. It was a sacrament, a transfer of command in the crimson strobing hell of the control room. McPherson's mind, the professor's mind, clawed past the shrieking frequency and the coppery stench of the core. He visualized the schematics he'd studied for years. Type 7 U-boats, Type 9, standard German naval architecture. This thing was different, but its purpose was the same, to dive. It would need ballast tanks. It would need vents. "Kano, the panel by the dead helmsman. Look for hydraulic levers labeled Tauchventil or Flutventil, main flood valves." Kano stumbled to the station, wiping black fluid off the console with his sleeve. The script was alien, but the symbols were universal. Stylized vents, spewing water. "I have them. 4 levers. Port and starboard. Bow and stern. Finch, find the manifold controls. The emergency blow system. We need to link the vents. Open everything at once." Finch, jolted from his terror by direct orders, scrambled to a secondary panel. "Valves are electric hydraulic. Circuits are dead. The core is draining all power into itself." "Then we make them manual," O'Malley roared. He unslung the sledgehammer from his back. "Show me a pipe!" The shriek from the core climbed another octave. The crimson flashes were almost continuous now. The swirling fluid in the cylinder was a glowing vortex. The fleshy nodules inside began to disintegrate, puffing into dark clouds that stained the silver fluid. Entfesseln pulsed on the main screen, each flash synchronized with a thunderous thump from the core that shook the deck plates. "There!" Reynolds pointed with his wrench to a thick bundled cluster of pipes running along the base of the rear bulkhead, labeled Ballastleitungen. "The main lines!" O'Malley didn't hesitate. He swung the sledgehammer. The first blow rang out, a deafening clang against the cacophony. The steel pipe dented. The second blow cracked a weld. The third blow shattered a valve housing. A jet of high-pressure hydraulic fluid, smelling of chemicals and heat, screamed into the room, spraying a fine, blinding mist. "The vents, Kano! Now!" McPherson yelled. Kano threw his whole weight onto the 4 levers. They resisted, then gave with a series of bone-shaking thunks that echoed through the hull. From outside, from deep within the skin of the U-boat, came a chorus of deep, groaning roars. The sea was rushing in. The submarine lurched, a long, deep list to port. The floor tilted beneath them. Tools, the shattered mug's dust, the bodies of the German crew in their chairs, all slid sideways. "She's flooding!" Reynolds braced himself in a doorway. "We're committed." The shrieking of the core changed. The note fractured, warped by the sudden shift in pressure, the invasion of cold seawater into the outer hull. The crimson light flickered, stuttered. But the word on the screen held. Entfesseln. The Storm Child's whaleboat. Their escape. It was still tied to the hull. McPherson's mind, even now, calculated the vector. "O'Malley! The forward hatch! The one we came down! Blow it open and cut the whaleboat line. It needs to drift clear, or it'll drag us down." O'Malley charged up the slanted deck toward the ladder tube, grabbing a fire axe from its bracket. The tilt increased. 10 degrees. 15. Icy seawater, forced in through a dozen giant vents, was killing the U-boat's buoyancy. The shrieking was now a guttural, straining roar from the core, fighting the changing pressure. Finch, still at the manifold, was crying openly, tears cutting tracks through the grime and hydraulic spray. "It's not stopping it. The reaction is still building. The pressure isn't high enough yet." He was right. The core was designed for deep ocean pressure. It would take hundreds of feet of crushing depth to implode that cylinder. They were just making it sink. McPherson looked at the core room, at the raging meat-machine hybrid. The diesel engine was smoking, pistons hammering at a blinding, suicidal speed. It was a race. Would the ocean crush the core first, or would the core finish its cycle and unleash its silent, liquefying pulse? He made his last calculation. "The diesel!" he shouted at Reynolds, his voice raw. "We rupture the fuel lines. In the core room. A fire, an explosion inside the pressure hull. It weakens the structure. It makes it crush faster." Reynolds met his eyes. A fire in a sinking, enclosed metal tube. There was no nuance to that plan. It was simply choosing how they died. "O'Malley!" Reynolds barked. "The axe! Now!" O'Malley, at the top of the ladder, turned and hurled the axe down the sloping deck. Reynolds caught it. He didn't look back. He charged through the melted hatchway into the core room, into the blinding, pulsing red mist and the deafening, dying machine scream. McPherson followed. The heat was immense. The diesel engine was a blur of motion, red hot. Reynolds swung the axe at a cluster of rubberized fuel lines on the engine's side. The first swing sliced through. Pressurized diesel fuel, atomized by the heat, erupted in a fine, oily spray. The second swing bit into the engine block itself, sparking off the metal. It was enough. The atomized cloud ignited. The explosion wasn't loud. It was a deep, concussive whoomp that sucked the air from McPherson's lungs. A fireball of brilliant yellow and orange bloomed in the crimson mist, consuming the diesel engine, licking up the sides of the glass cylinder. The core's light went wild, strobing white, red, then a painful ultraviolet. The shriek became a digital, jagged scream of feedback. The hull groaned. a long, deep, metallic agony that vibrated through their bones. The explosion had buckled a plate. The ocean's infinite weight found the weakness. From above, a new sound. The roar of inrushing water, not just into ballast tanks, but into the boat itself. O'Malley had blown the upper hatch. The sea was coming for them directly. Reynolds was on the deck, his jacket smoldering. McPherson hauled him up. "Time to go." "Go where?" Reynolds coughed, blood on his lips. They stumbled back into the control room. It was a swirling nightmare of tilted light, smoke, and the first fingers of icy seawater pouring from the ladder tube. Finch and Kano were at the base of it, the water already at their knees. "Up!" McPherson pushed them toward the ladder. "Up and out! Swim like hell!" O'Malley reached down from the hatch combing, his massive arms straining. He hauled Finch up through the geyser of seawater, then Kano. McPherson shoved Reynolds toward the ladder. "Move, Chief!" Reynolds climbed. McPherson followed, the water rising around him, up his chest, shockingly cold. He grabbed the last rung as the control room filled behind him. He pulled himself out onto the steep, slick slope of the conning tower. Night air, cold and clean, hit his face. The Storm Child's searchlights were still pinned on them, 100 yards away but looking a million miles. The U-boat was going down fast, bow first, the ocean swallowing the black wedge. "Jump!" McPherson screamed. One by one they leaped into the freezing, churning black water. McPherson took a last look down the open hatch. He saw the crimson core light, now deep underwater inside the hull, pulsing its final defiant rhythm. He saw the word Entfesseln on a screen, submerged and dying. Then he jumped. The water was a slap of absolute cold. He surfaced, gasping, kicking away from the sucking vortex of the sinking hull. He saw his men, foreheads bobbing in the searchlights. O'Malley, Kano, Finch, Reynolds. The whaleboat, its line cut, drifted nearby. Behind them, the last of the black angular conning tower slipped beneath the Atlantic, with a final, gurgling sigh. A vast bubble of air and burning diesel fuel erupted on the surface, then was gone. The shrieking stopped, the humming stopped. The crimson light was extinguished. Only the searchlights of the Storm Child remained, and the sound of men gasping for air in the sudden, immense silence. They had not captured a secret. They had buried one. At a cost, they could only start to measure as strong hands from the Storm Child's rescue boat hauled their freezing, shattered bodies from the water. James McPherson looked back at the now placid dark circle where the Phantom had been. He saw no ghost, only a grave, and he knew as he was pulled onto the deck to face Briggs's fury and a court-martial that some doors, once opened, should never be closed again. They could only be sealed, under miles of black, silent, crushing pressure, forever.